Hey, this is Steve Good on the Coin Chat with my co-host Yuri Cataldo, and today we are with a presidential candidate who's also a big fan of blockchain, Andrew Yang. Andrew, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on.
Thank you for having me, both of you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic.
Thank you for joining us.
So
yes, I'm joining from my home. I was joking with the guys. It's my kids' room. It's even presidential candidates have to hide from their families sometimes.
Don't we all? I'm hiding behind a green screen here.
Yeah, so I'm just glad I have a family to hide from.
It's true.
That has good and bad sometimes. So, I think it's great to have you on the show. Really, thank you so much for taking the time out. I know you're a busy guy. You're out. You've got a lot of things to do to raise awareness of your presidential candidacy and generating all that interest. And, I think for Yuri and I, we just wanted to have a chance to talk with you and to help you raise a bit of awareness around your campaign and kind of get to know a little bit about what you're doing. Of course, from our perspective, we'd love to hear a lot more about your interests in your view on blockchain. And we've got some questions we put together for you to just, have an open discussion and just kind of hear where it's all going to go and what you see is happening.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you for sensing that we're incredibly aligned, where my vision of the economy is very consistent with the people who are in the cryptocurrency community and are working on blockchain advancements, where we need to move towards a more decentralized system for sure, that's more transparent. And blockchain, it's like many other technologies where it's going to have its drawbacks at various times, but the long-term potential is staggering. And really the reason I fell into so many friends in the community is that I found that approximately 99% of people in the blockchain community are pro-universal basic income, which, as you may know, is the central pillar of my campaign.
Yes.
So I arrived at that through the reality that we are automating away millions of American jobs. We've already automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs, leading to Donald Trump's election in 2016. And now we need to start evolving. And to me, moving toward the blockchain is part of that evolution. So one of the things we're looking at right now is we could potentially enable voting on the blockchain in a way that would free people up from these lines at poll stations and all these systems that everyone's like not even sure if they're getting hacked by the Russians and the rest of it.
Yeah,
right.
There are things we can do. I was just at a meeting of people who are looking to distribute universal basic income on the blockchain, which I think is where it will go eventually. I'm also for the implementation of a national digital currency to supplement the dollar, because there are many, many things that we could do that the dollar cannot do. So this campaign really, and one of the jokes I tell is that people sometimes call me a futurist, but I believe I'm a presentist. It's just that most of the politicians are stuck in the past because that's just their experience.
For sure.
But for me, I've been a serial entrepreneur. I've worked in technology for about 20 years, and I know what's possible. So with people like you, hopefully we can spread that word to people around the country.
So, it's interesting. So, an interesting point that you made. You raised a couple of comments in this that I wanted to pick up on. One was the transparency, which, as you probably know, with cryptocurrency, when you get into privacy coins, it creates some interesting dilemmas, especially for the IRS and for tax. The other thing that I'm wondering about, so I'm just going to ask you these two things together, is that I'm based in London, by the way. Yuri's based in Boston. So as an outsider that spent most of my last 2 years in the crypto world as an advisor to other companies, what I've seen is a complete absence of the US being really present, mostly because of regulation, because of the SEC. And I'm just wondering if you have any particular views on how we can open up the potential channels for allowing the US to really thrive in a cryptocurrency community or a crypto community, a blockchain community, when there's been so much that's restricted America, while we've seen China and Korea and Japan and India and some parts of Europe just thrive, Russia thriving because, technology and people have been able to really get into it. And I've seen the US just kind of fall behind on some respects. Do you have any, thoughts on privacy and its impact on tax, and also how we can open up the channels to really open up the doors for more innovation in crypto and blockchain for the U.S.?
I think that the second point is so key, where people think of America as like the hotbed of innovation and technology, when in reality, the American, certainly the political system, is quite backward and retrograde and incredibly bureaucratic. And you can see it with the blockchain and other cryptocurrencies, where the U.S. has essentially thrown its hands up and been like, don't really have an approach here. And so as a result, certainly there are many people in America who are making use of cryptocurrencies, but it's not as supported, and there's a lot more confusion in the U.S. because the place is just not as forward-looking. So I hope to be able to change that. I mean, as president, I believe I can start to move America forward. And one of the other jokes I tell is that the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes meth. Where his goal is to freeze time and turn the clock backwards, and we need to accelerate time and move it forwards. And that includes certainly having a much more intelligent approach to the blockchain and other technologies that would really. So I think the other thing that's going on in the U.S. that's very painful to admit is that there's just a lot of rent seeking in the U.S. And the truth is, if you had the blockchain and other technologies fully revved up, then you would end up disintermediating accounting firms and law firms and financial institutions. And those institutions really control much of the American system, where no one wants to let anything out that's going to end up disrupting their revenue streams.
Interesting. Yuri, over to you. Go ahead. Ask a couple questions.
So you're one of the few presidential candidates who are accepting cryptocurrencies on your site, which I think is amazing. And you yourself have mentioned on your website that the campaign donors have to register, and also not to share your wallet address so that people can't make untraceable donations. I'd like to hear your thoughts on how this could eventually maybe affect politics in the future, because a lot of people believe that when they hear Bitcoin or blockchain or cryptocurrencies, they think of money launderers, drug dealers, and then dark money. So how would you approach this idea of getting cryptocurrencies involved without that dark money aspect?
Yeah, and hopefully, like even my campaign can be an example of this, where if it's simply an exchange of value, there's nothing sinister about it.
Right.
And certainly for us, I joke that you could donate chickens to my campaign as long as I knew that it was you, and the chickens are like worth a certain amount. And so you can't just anonymously donate Ether or Bitcoin to our campaign from FEC rulings. Like, you just have to tell us who you are. And if we were to get something anonymous, then unfortunately we couldn't make use of it. So that would sort of defeat the purpose. But hopefully my campaign can shine a light on the fact that this is a great way to exchange value and transfer value to another party. And that, my campaign's already collected thousands of dollars in cryptocurrency donations, and we hope that continues. It's something, I've always wanted to demonstrate that I'm very, very aligned with the values of the community. And so hopefully, like you said, we can disabuse people of the notions that anything to do with cryptocurrency means you're, a drug dealer or something.
Right.
So, the fact that you have the, Bitcoin mentioned on your website is interesting, because one of the things that we've seen running a YouTube show, having website and all the rest, is because of the word cryptocurrency or Bitcoin anywhere through any of our channels, we can't advertise anything. And I'm wondering, do you have the same problems having a website that has "we accept Bitcoin" causing you any problems with advertising? And generally, for all the rest of us out, if you're not having any problems, if for the rest of us who are struggling to just run any form of advertising on anything that we do, what's your thought on that, about how much we're being blocked from talking about what we're doing and how we're educating people in crypto or blockchain?
Well, that's really interesting. I didn't realize that, because we haven't had those problems. And it could be because we have one page that says Bitcoin, and then we have hundreds of other pages that are doing other things.
Could be.
But those restrictions are very interesting. I'm scratching my head thinking, why do those restrictions exist? I can imagine some rationale. I'm sure that whatever is being done is overly broad.
Yeah, I mean, I did a Facebook Live video today. It was less than 5 minutes long, and it was a quick explainer video for people to just understand how does mining work, why it's not a Ponzi scheme, and what the mechanisms are for using computers to mine and to verify transactions like the way a bank does. That was it. Our marketing team attempted to go ahead and just, promote it on Facebook to make it more widely seen. Blocked. Not allowed. We have not been able to advertise anything on our channels across Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. So you're same companies again and again here. It's Facebook, it's Twitter, it's Google. And I'm just wondering, at what point do we kind of open this up a little bit so that, we have to draw a line somewhere. But, it just seems to me that there's something to be said
actually
about.
really, I mean, like one, that's surprising to me, but two, it shows just how much clout and distribution power is concentrated in the hands of a handful of platforms.
Yes.
And in a way, what it does is it highlights the rationale for the blockchain and Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies to begin with, which is that you're trying to create a more decentralized system that doesn't rely upon like 5 institutions or one institution or one government or whatever it is.
That's right.
To approve. So in a way, this is proof positive of the rationale for the importance of your work. It's unfortunate that we unfortunately are beholden to a handful of tech platforms to get the word out. And certainly as a presidential candidate, I mean, I've got a social media team and we're Instagram living and the rest of it. So I get it.
Right.
And if you're not on these platforms, then it's like you don't exist. So to entrepreneurs out there, in a way, what we need some more decentralized social media platforms. Though I don't know how you do that because of the fact that ubiquity in that context obviously ends up driving utility.
There's definitely a number of them on the way. I've come across a few of them myself, and there's a range of things that they're trying to do to create a decentralized environment for social media, and they run into similar problems mostly around privacy, because they don't want to hold the data, but in order for their systems to actually be smart enough for provisioning the data, they run into problems of, do we hold the data or do we allow the users to control the data? And it's an interesting problem because, we've seen what the Cambridge Analytics problem did to Facebook. And so what I see is a lot of these blockchain projects that don't want to go down that path and yet are confronted with, sometimes they need some of the data and they're trying to figure out what the line is, where the balance is, so they're not seen as doing exactly what nobody wants. So
that's so interesting.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you guys a joke that I told at this blockchain event I spoke at earlier this week, which was someone asked the question, why is Bitcoin worth $7,000? And then the response was, why is $7,000 worth $7,000?
Right.
Yeah.
But it's because what you're describing really is, and it took me a little while to get it. It took me a little while to understand the ethos of what was possible and what the community is driving towards. But I'm convinced that we need to move in that direction as fast as possible. And we need to replace this mindset of resource scarcity that is taking over certainly the U.S. in a very dark way, and replace it with a mindset of abundance and future orientation and what is still possible. And the fact that, we can build a very different kind of society very quickly. But we need to get our acts together and make it. And this is one of the things I told the Bitcoin folks too. So I'm running for president, and some people, probably many of the people listening to this right now, will think to themselves, this guy seems sort of interesting, but the but is there's no way he can win. Something along those lines.
We've heard that before, haven't we?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So I'm heading to Iowa for the 8th time next week. And what I boil it down to people is I'm an Asian guy, and Asians are really good at tests. And so the question is what is the test to become president of the United States? And it turns out there's all of this media noise and endorsements. There's really only one, maybe two tests involved. Can you win the caucus in Iowa, and can you win the primary in New Hampshire in February 2020? Now, I'm just going to break this down for people who are listening because, it makes people realize what's possible. So Iowa is a state of 3.1 million people, but only 5.6% of them participated in the Democratic caucus last time. 171,000 out of 3.1 million. So let's make that number 200,000. How many people do we think are going to run for president as a Democrat this cycle?
A few dozen, 20, 30.
Yes. So if, let's say you have 20 to 30 candidates and you have 200,000 votes, how many Iowans do I need to get on my side saying we should get $1,000 a month dividend in order for me to finish the top 3 in 2020? Maybe 25 to 30,000 Iowans.
Yeah.
Yeah, about 30,000 Iowans. I'm top 3. So when people go through all this and say, like, hey, long shot candidate, blah, 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 none of it matters if we can get 30,000 Iowans on board with the idea that them getting $1,000 a month is a good idea. And when I go to Iowa, I'm already polling in Iowa. I'm already tied with Kirsten Gillibrand in Iowa as of last year, because I go to Iowa and I ask people, have you noticed stores closing in your towns? And they say, yes. And then I say, why is that? And then they say, Amazon. And I'm like, that's right. And what are you going to do about it? And then they look at me, they're like, I can do something about it. And I was like, well, if you make me president, I'm going to bring back $1,000 a month to you, and you can rebuild your Main Street economy and give your kids a reason to stay. And that gets 20% of them thinking, yeah, like that is about the only thing we can do. So I'm just presenting this as like a vision as to how change is possible much, much faster than people think.
Sure.
Yeah. So while you're in Iowa, because that's interesting, the idea of a universal basic income is something I know that's been floated before, but a lot of people are hesitant about it. What are some of the strategies you're using to talk to Iowans about why it's important to do this?
Well, I talked to them about the fact that Trump's our president because we got rid of 4 million manufacturing jobs, including 40,000 in Iowa. So they saw that happen. And then, and then you say, hey, what happened to the manufacturing jobs we're about to do to your retail jobs, your call center jobs, your food service jobs, your truck driving jobs, all of which are huge employment categories in Iowa. And so then I say, look, it may seem far out or socialist to you, but if you look at our history, Thomas Paine was for it, Martin Luther King was for it, Richard Nixon was for it, Milton Friedman was for it, 1,000 economists were for it. And it's been law in one state, Alaska, for the last 37 years, where everyone in that state gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year.
Right.
And they look at me and they're like, that happens? And I'm like, yeah, you can move to Alaska and you get that money too.
Really?
And they pay for it with oil. And then I ask them, what is the oil of the 21st century? And then they scratch their head for a second. And then someone says, technology? And I'm like, that's right. What we did for Alaska with oil, we can do for you and the rest of the country with technology. And
isn't Norway already doing something like this anyway? Because Norway is like a massive oil producing country, and the citizens have like a really, really nice life there. I mean, I don't know exactly what they're doing, but I know that there's some sort of system that enables them to all have a very comfortable life because of the amount of oil that's government money.
Yeah, the Nordic countries, Northern European countries like Denmark, they either have incredibly robust social safety nets or something close to the equivalent of a universal basic income right now.
Right.
But as you can imagine, in the U.S., certainly Alaska is a much more, relevant example for them because, and also Alaska is like a deep red conservative state. So then it makes them think like this is not somehow some like far left socialist.
God forbid a Democrat should be supporting what's happening in a Republican state.
Yeah. Someone called me the shuffler, where like I shuffle all the orientation.
I'd like to see that like live.
And like libertarians are coming out for me. Many Trump voters are coming up to me and saying, I voted for Donald Trump, I'll vote for you because you're an outsider, you want to shake things up. You're talking about the same problems he was talking about, but you have real solutions.
Interesting. You stated on your website that Americans should be able to vote via their mobile phones with verification done via blockchain. How would you sell that to the older generation of American people and calm their fears about being hacked or issues with using some new technology, and to kind of lower their fears considering some of the noise we heard from the last election?
Yeah, so the truth is that any voting system you're going to be working with legacy systems and the paper backup for some period of time. So to me, the big move we have to start making is we have to start making it so you have multimodal voting, where people who are comfortable voting on their smartphone just like beep boop, like done. And then if you're an old person, you want to wait in line, like be our guest. But you pretty much need to keep them both around for a little while, because the other thing is that people would be concerned about not having some kind of hard copy backup.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yeah. So this has been absolutely fantastic chatting with you so far. If the cryptocurrency community would like to get behind what you're working on or find out more of that, how can they best work with you and support you and get the word out about what you're doing?
Well, thanks so much for asking. Just go to yang2020.com. You get a sense of our platform. If you do have some cryptocurrency around that you'd like to donate to the campaign, just go to yang2020.com/crypto, and then you can make a donation there. We could certainly use your help. Those of you who like to create memes, I really want to become the internet candidate. So,
are you doing any memes?
Are
you doing any kind of meme competitions on Instagram or Twitter at all?
We're doing some stuff like that, but we're not as far along. We haven't caught really like the right set of memes as yet. But my team's super optimistic about it, because apparently I'm more memeable than many of the other candidates.
What does that mean?
One thing is like there's like the Drake God's Plan video where he's just giving money to people, and there's like sticking my head on it, and I'm just like giving. I'm actually giving $1,000 a month personally to a family in New Hampshire that got picked up by CNBC, and the rest of it just to illustrate. Shocker, $1,000 a month will actually help people's lives.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, here's $1,000 a month, and then people are like, is that allowed? And I'm like, apparently. I mean, we checked with the FEC; it is allowed.
Yeah.
And it was so inspiring that a couple in Georgia said that they're going to donate $1,000 a month to another family in South Carolina just to support my campaign, just to show giving people money would actually improve people's lives.
That's amazing.
I know it's incredible. Like we can really start a movement here that helps open people's eyes to the fact that value can be distributed very, very differently, and that this can be a world of abundance instead of a world of resource scarcity and dog eat dog.
Yeah, well, we certainly talk about scarcity versus abundance. That's something that Yuri and I have both learned a lot about, and we talk about, because we know how important it is that when you're trying to fundraise for a project or raise money as a company and be successful, that you want to create that feeling of abundance and that there's the ability to make things happen rather than being held back because something's getting in the way. So we talk about that all the time because it's a fundamental thing to run a business or to be successful.
Yeah, guys, I'm a serial entrepreneur. Before this, I started an organization called Venture for America that trained hundreds of entrepreneurs and created thousands of jobs in the Midwest and the South. That's why I know what's going on in the Midwest and the South.
Yeah.
But that's one reason why I vibe so well with your community, is that you all are so entrepreneurial and future-oriented and have that mindset of abundance that's necessary to make any of these positive things happen. And it's one of the things I try and explain to people. It's like, look, if you want people to be entrepreneurial, you can't have them living paycheck to paycheck and freaking out about paying their bills every day. Like that's not going to lead to like awesome new business formation and creativity. Right. Whereas if you get people's heads up and start thinking, hey, if I build this, then I can make it better and I can get the resources and like we've got a great idea. So that's one reason why I love the work you all do in your community so much, because we need to create that mindset in people all around really all around the world.
Yeah, well, I was working in big corporate world, and I left it to do crypto, and I've been independent now for the last 2.5 years, just working, helping companies, advising them with strategy, helping them figure out where they're going with their product roadmaps and all that kind of stuff. And it's an interesting place to live, being, truly entrepreneurial on my own. And we're going to get Yuri to do the same soon too, right, Yuri?
That's right.
Hey, I gotta say, I mean, it's the best thing you'll ever do. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do. It's like the most growth-inducing thing you'll ever do.
Yeah.
So it's all of those things, but it helps. It helps elevate the human experience in my
for sure.
In my view.
So just for a moment, we're talking blockchain, but I just want to ask a question because we're here talking about the universal basic income premise. How do you fund it? Because one of the things I listened to one of the podcasts that you were on, and it sounded like you were talking about, maybe I got this wrong, but you were talking about, the big conglomerates like an Amazon that's taking jobs away and how you might want to perhaps tax them more or create a VAT tax. But what I'm thinking about is how does that work so that it doesn't damage the growth that these potential companies have, and at the same time enable a level playing field for everybody to actually get the universal basic income without it affecting the companies around them?
Yeah, so the VAT I'm recommending is half the European level, which would not meaningfully affect the incentives for automation and innovation. And I talk to techies and entrepreneurs, and they actually say like that's a much better approach than if you were to actually, for example, tax AI or tax like specific things. So like a VAT's more of like a gentle redistribution. And if you look at it, every advanced economy already has one except for the United States.
Right.
So really
we have sales tax in the U.S. versus a VAT. So would you still retain the local sales tax on each state and then put a national VAT on top of all sales?
Yeah, as you say, the state tax is very much a state-by-state decision. Some have it, some don't. But keep in mind that all of the money is going straight into the hands of American consumers and is going to go right back into like the hands of businesses around the country, including like the Amazons of the world. So when I talk to CEOs, they find this plan to be much, much more amicable than some of the other things that are being bandied about.
Interesting.
Guys, I've got to run, but thank you for the work that you do. Anyone who wants to follow up with any of this, please do. Just Google Andrew Yang or go to yang2020.com, and let's build a future that we can be proud of together. So keep it up. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. It's great to have you on the show, and we'll look forward to seeing you for perhaps a live episode in one of the caucuses if you'd like.
Oh, yeah, it'd be a lot of fun. Just head to Iowa, New Hampshire. I'll be there.
Perfect.
Right.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much for joining us. Hey, and thanks everybody for joining us today on the Coin Chat with Andrew Yang, who's running for president and also a big advocate of blockchain. To the moon. Until next time.